Lucas Kane's boots crunched against the arid soil of Velmora Prime, a world rich in starlight, yet filled with shadows cast by its 3 moons, drifting high above the gilded spires of the capital city. He had come as a humble engineer from the Terran Dominion, expecting little more than a routine series of maintenance checks on the planetary communication arrays. Duty had summoned him, and he was eager to earn his pay, then depart as swiftly as the starship fueling bay would allow. But fate, ever the jester, had other plans in store. He found himself in the grand courtyard of the Imperial Palace, an architectural marvel that soared toward the shimmering galaxies overhead. Columns carved of jade-like crystals reflected swirling lights across the courtyard, where polished marble steps led to intricate hallways, and inlaid tiles told ancient tales of Velmoran triumphs. Lucas, enthralled by the exotic design, hardly noticed the hum of ceremonial horns as they sounded from tall, slender towers stationed along the palace walls. Only when the resonant echoes faded did he catch the murmuring of a crowd gathering at the courtyard's far edge. On any other day, he might have merely gawked for a moment, then continued on his assigned path. But the pressing schedule, he had mere hours to complete an array of repairs, forced him forward, straight across the courtyard. He hurried, ducking beneath sweeping awnings of purple and gold that bore the imperial seal of Velmora, a single star encircled by 2 entwined serpents. His tool-laden bag jingled by his side, and the faint sigh of his respirator accompanied each hurried breath. The planet's atmosphere was largely breathable for humans, yet mild filtration was always recommended to avoid the local allergens. As he rushed on, eyes fixed on his handheld device's map, he did not realize that a formal procession, flanked by lines of royal guards, had just turned the corner. In the center of this procession were the twin princesses of the Velmoran Empire, Princess Aelara and Princess Sylis, each dressed in ceremonial robes spun from the glimmering threads of astral silk. Aelara stood tall, her posture regal, raven-black hair bound in opulent circlets. Sylis, with coppery locks and bright, curious eyes, wore a gentle smile that betrayed her kinder nature. Between them, a line of aristocrats moved in fluid unison, acknowledging the gathered onlookers, whose cheers rose like a wave through the courtyard. In that instant, Lucas looked up, realized his path intersected theirs, and froze. Guards stepped forward, spears leveled in a bristling wall of steel points. He tried to halt, but the polished marble betrayed him. His foot slid, the marble too slick for his dust-caked boots. He fell forward in a graceless sprawl. Arms flailing, he reached out to break his fall, and his hands brushed directly across the silken sleeves of Princess Aelara and Princess Sylis. All movement ceased. The horns, the chatter, the laughter of bystanders, everything ended in a suffocating hush. Lucas blinked, mortified at the contact, his instincts screaming that he had just made a colossal mistake. Aelara gasped, eyes wide. Sylis, equally shocked, stared at Lucas with parted lips. Guards, in a flurry of movement, seized Lucas by both arms and pinned him to the ground. He could only stammer apologies. Yet the princesses did not shriek or recoil in horror. They did not bellow accusations as Lucas had feared. Instead, their gazes locked onto his, as if studying his soul. Courtiers hissed among themselves, but the princess's silence lingered longer than any whispered rumor. Soon, a wave of official murmuring swept through the assembly. Lucas was roughly pulled to his feet, the guards jostling him. None dared harm the princess's attire further, and thus they handled him with an odd mix of roughness and caution. At length, an imposing figure separated himself from the retinue of nobles. Chancellor Erastes, a tall, austere man whose eyes glimmered with cold brilliance. He wore a floor-length robe embroidered with star charts. "You are charged," Erastes intoned, voice echoing across the courtyard, with direct contact, an uninvited touch, upon the princesses of the Velmoran Empire. He paused, letting the gravity of those words sink into every ear. By the ancient laws of our realm, such contact, however accidental, constitutes an immediate marital bond. You, outsider, are now betrothed to Princess Aelara and Princess Sylis. Lucas's heart almost stopped. Marriage? He dared glance at the princesses, but they wore expressions as stunned as his own. Every soldier and court official glared at him with a mixture of outrage, curiosity, and perhaps a touch of pity. But I didn't. This was an accident, Lucas managed to choke out. Erastes, with eyes like ice, raised a hand. The law is the law. Unless their highnesses themselves refute the claim, you are, by right and custom, bound in union. This union is recognized by the cosmic treaties upheld by our emperor and his forebears, and it shall be upheld by all. As soon as a wedding ceremony can be prepared, you shall be bound to them in body and in vow. A murmur ran through the spectators, and somewhere among them, a cackling voice asked, "You dared touch the princesses? Galactic law says you're their husband now. No escape." The flippant remark stirred indignation in Lucas's heart, yet it also sent waves of dread through his mind. He searched for an ally, any figure that might listen to reason. To his surprise, Princess Sylis stepped forward, her copper hair catching the reflection of the multiple suns above. Her voice, though soft, carried across the hush. "Chancellor, the law indeed states this," she said quietly. "But we must not treat this man with cruelty. He claims it was an accident. We saw with our own eyes. He slipped. He did not intend offense." Chancellor Erastes bowed, though only with faint courtesy. "Your Highness, the law is unequivocal. To be touched by an outsider is a matter of grave seriousness." Now Princess Aelara spoke, her voice calm yet regal. "It is possible, dear sister, that there was no malice. Yet we must uphold our traditions. Velmoran custom cannot be cast aside so lightly." The guard's grip on Lucas's arms tightened at that statement. He found himself trembling, both from fear and from the utter bizarreness of this predicament. Marriage? To two princesses, in the blink of an eye? His entire life had revolved around starship repairs, advanced thruster schematics, and fleeting travel from outpost to outpost. Never had he imagined stepping into a royal drama, let alone a forced union. He tried to speak again, to no avail. The Chancellor's command overshadowed all other voices. Within minutes, the entire procession moved inside, leaving Lucas to be hustled along by armed sentinels into the labyrinthine corridors of the palace. Tapestries and mosaic floors whirled past his vision, though he could barely appreciate the artistry in his current turmoil. Soon, he was deposited in a grand chamber, replete with velvet furnishings, gilded chairs, and a wide window opening onto a breathtaking vista of the city. The guards stationed themselves outside the door, sealing him within as if he were a dangerous criminal. In the silence of that opulent room, Lucas sank onto a plush divan, breath ragged. His mind reeled, replaying the moment his hands brushed those silken sleeves. He cursed his luck. Why had he chosen that exact route? Why had the floor been so slick? Why, in the name of all that was sensible, did Velmora have such an archaic law? Time passed slowly, measured by the quiet hum of the palace's ambient systems and the faint whisper of the breeze through the open window. The twin suns set, painting the sky outside in indigo and ember. Eventually, the door opened, and a new figure stepped in, an older woman with silver hair braided into a crown, her eyes kind but her expression firm. "I am Lady Mayrila," she offered, inclining her head. "Chief Steward of the Velmoran court. I have come to inform you that, unless the Emperor himself decrees otherwise, you will be wed to the princesses in 3 days' time. Preparations are already underway." Lucas tried to gather himself, though his voice quavered. Please, there must be some mistake. This can't be undone." Lady Mayrila's eyes softened. "I fear not, good sir. The ancient codes are strict, and we are bound to them. Princess Aelara and Princess Sylis have not contested the marriage, likely because they cannot openly defy these laws without inciting turmoil. Indeed, the entire realm looks to this event. The union of an off-worlder and the royal line is something unseen in centuries. There is more at stake than you realize." He could only nod, feeling as though the room were spinning. Lady Mayrila placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "All is not hopeless," she added. "Though you come from beyond our stars, our people value sincerity and courage. If you present yourself in good faith, you may find acceptance here, and who knows, perhaps the princesses themselves will come to respect your character. Though the circumstances are unfortunate, your life is now bound with ours." She exited with a respectful nod, leaving Lucas alone once more. A swirl of thoughts consumed him. The imperial wedding, the responsibilities that came with being not just a royal consort, but a consort to two princesses. Would he be forced to live in this palace, severed from his old life? The magnitude of his predicament pressed on him like a leaden weight. The next morning, dawn's pale light found Lucas drifting in an uneasy slumber on the divan, awakened intermittently by the distant clang of ceremonial gongs. At the hour of the first sun's rise, the door opened to admit two unexpected visitors, the princesses themselves. Princess Aelara, clad in a flowing gown of midnight blue, stood with her chin held high. Princess Sylis, sporting a gentle smile, wore a lighter shade that caught rays of dawn, reflecting them in subtle sparks of color. Both, flanked by discreet guards, approached Lucas with caution. He rose to his feet at once, arms stiff at his sides, uncertain of decorum. He bowed awkwardly, stammering a greeting. Aelara spoke first. "Lucas Kane," she said, each syllable precisely enunciated. "We wish to know the truth of yesterday's events. You maintain this contact was but an accident?" "Yes, Your Highness," he managed. "I had no idea your procession was passing. My boots slipped on the polished floor. I never intended disrespect." Sylis's eyes sparkled with compassion. "It is unfortunate, indeed. But you see, the law is unwavering. My sister and I have spoken through the night on this matter. We had hoped we might find a clause, a hidden precedent, to release you. There seems to be none." Lucas swallowed the knot in his throat. "And so, this marriage must happen?" Princess Aelara glanced at Sylis, then inclined her head. "If we do not perform the ceremony, there will be outcry from traditionalists within the Empire, especially certain factions in the High Council who have long opposed any leniency in archaic laws. Such an outrage could destabilize the realm, at a moment when politics are delicate. For all its strangeness, your presence here, your accident, may shield us from a greater conflict." Her voice was tinged with resignation, and Lucas realized that Princess Aelara, though proud, was not cruel. She simply wore the mantle of royalty, burdened with centuries of inherited duty. Beside her, Sylis gave Lucas a sympathetic nod. "We regret how this has happened, but we do not blame you. We only ask that you treat us, and our people, with respect." He exhaled, recalling Lady Marilla's words. Perhaps acceptance was the only path forward. I promise to do my best," he said, voice trembling, "but this is all so sudden." Sylis offered a faint smile. "It is sudden for us as well." That day, a swirl of wedding preparations overtook the palace. Seamstresses flitted in and out, carrying swatches of astral silk so fine it seemed spun from moonlight. Courtiers debated over the menu for the grand banquet that would follow the wedding. Musicians, practicing alien melodies, filled the corridors with haunting echoes. Through it all, Lucas was whisked from chamber to chamber, measured for ceremonial attire, examined by palace physicians to ensure he carried no foreign contagions, and coached by etiquette masters who demanded he master the minimal steps of Velmoran wedding protocol. Each night, he collapsed into bed, mind-spinning. He slept now in a small but lavish guest suite, with tall windows overlooking the capital's winding streets. Once or twice, exhaustion carried him into deep slumber, but more often, he found himself staring at the ceiling, pondering his future. Could he truly remain on Velmora Prime indefinitely? Would he ever leave, or was the starship that brought him here, the Iron Horizon, destined to depart without him? In the midst of this storm, Princess Sylis emerged as a steadying force. On the second day, she requested an informal meeting in the palace gardens. Lucas arrived to find her surrounded by exotic flora, pale-limbed trees that dripped diamond-like sap, broad blossoms that emitted pastel mist under the warmth of the suns. She offered him a seat on a carved stone bench. Tiny insects, shining like glass, hovered among the petals, creating a serene backdrop. "You seem troubled," she observed gently. Lucas, glancing at her, fought the urge to bury his face in his hands. "I'm overwhelmed," he admitted. "For me, this is a nightmare. I've lost control of my life. At home, I have no family left. I've been wandering the galaxy, taking jobs as they come. But at least I was free to roam. Here, it's as though I've been caged in a gilded prison." She nodded slowly. "I understand that sense of helplessness. Believe me, I too have felt trapped by traditions. Despite my title, my path is chosen for me, duty, protocol, the demands of the realm. My sister and I rarely get to decide our own futures." Her voice quieted. "But if we must share these burdens, perhaps we can do so cordially. Perhaps, in time, we might even find we share more interests than we imagine." Lucas found some measure of relief in Sylis's kindness, though he was not yet sure how he felt about Aelara. Where Sylis was open and friendly, Aelara appeared distant, locked in her sense of duty. He could not blame her. She stood first in line to the throne, a future empress, no doubt well-versed in diplomacy and steeled by years of training. As the final day before the wedding dawned, the planet's capital thrummed with excitement. Banners of gold and violet draped across tall towers, and the roads were lined with luminescent orbs that glowed in the night. News of the unprecedented union between an off-worlder and the princesses had spread across Velmora Prime, and countless citizens gathered near the palace, hoping for a glimpse of the spectacle. In the hush of early evening, Lucas was escorted to a quiet corridor. There, Princess Aelara herself waited, flanked by no attendants. She beckoned him to follow her into a small library, lined with ancient tomes. The sweet scent of paper and the hush of that place offered calm. "Lucas," she said, turning to him once they were alone, "I will not pretend that I am happy about this wedding. I had once entertained hopes of forging alliances through a different, more strategic marriage. But the law demanded otherwise." She paused, searching his face. "Nevertheless, I can see you are no schemer. You did not plan this. I only ask one thing. Should you remain in our kingdom, do not attempt to undermine us or shirk your responsibilities. Princess Sylis and I expect honesty and loyalty, nothing less. My father, the Emperor, will soon return to Velmora, and his eyes will judge all. Do you understand?" He nodded, swallowing. "Yes, Princess. I never sought this, but I will respect you and Sylis. I have nowhere else to turn." Aelara regarded him for a long moment. "Then let us proceed with the ceremony. May it bring stability, rather than discord." The wedding day arrived with a blazing sunrise over the crystalline spires of the palace. Bells tolled in the city below, and from the grand balcony, Lucas saw an ocean of citizens gathered in the main plaza. Flower petals drifted in the breeze, forming pastel clouds. Music, solemn yet hauntingly beautiful, echoed over the rooftops. Inside the palace's great hall, everything shimmered in regal splendor. Tiers of seating rose beneath a dome of glass that revealed the brightening sky. At the center stood a circular dais, woven from luminescent vines, where the wedding vows would take place. Lucas, dressed in a robe of deep silver, felt as though the eyes of the entire galaxy were upon him. If only his old friends, far away on distant worlds, could see him now, uncertain and alone, yet surrounded by such ceremony. Princess Sylis entered first, escorted by Lady Marilla. Sylis wore a gown of soft, iridescent white, trimmed with subtle patterns that caught the glimmers of the overhead chandeliers. She moved gracefully, her expression gentle yet unwavering. Then came Princess Aelara, in regal attire of midnight blue, embroidered with golden filigree depicting star charts. A hush fell over the hall, so profound one could almost hear each breath. High Priestess Calathea, robed in flowing cloth studded with crystals, presided over the ceremony. In measured tones, she spoke of unity, the forging of alliances, and the cosmic significance of a marriage that united hearts and, in Velmoran law, entire destinies. Lucas stood, arms tense at his sides, as the priestess called for him to step forward. The dais beneath his feet throbbed with a gentle pulse of energy. The vow was both spoken and telepathically reinforced by the priestess's ancient chant. Lucas felt a strange warmth settle across his chest as he repeated the scripted lines. "By the cosmic threads that bind all life, I pledge my devotion, my protection, and my faith to Princesses Aelara and Sylis, heirs of Velmora." Then, in unison, the princesses spoke, their voices weaving like two notes of a perfect chord. "By the same threads, we receive your pledge and grant you ours, to uphold your honor and guide your spirit in the ways of our people." A final, resonating chime echoed from the dome overhead, signaling that the vows had been sealed. Applause, hesitant at first, rose from the assembled courtiers, then thundered through the great hall. Lucas, heart pounding, glanced from Aelara to Sylis. Despite the weight of duty, both offered him a faint, reassuring nod. He was now, irrevocably, their husband, bound by the ancient rites of Velmora, with all the consequences and responsibilities that entailed. No sooner had the celebrations begun, an opulent feast in the palace's banquet hall, an endless parade of well-wishers and curious dignitaries, than the first signs of trouble surfaced. Lucas, seated beside Aelara and Sylis at a long table laden with delicacies, noticed an undercurrent of tension. Officials conversed in hushed tones, casting furtive glances at him. Guards patrolled with more urgency than a mere wedding might require. Between polite exchanges with various nobles, Lucas tried to discern the cause. Aelara, ever perceptive, leaned close to him at one point, her voice barely above a whisper. There have been rumors of a plot against the throne. Perhaps even an attempt on our lives, she murmured. It is why security has been so strict. I fear that bringing an off-worlder into the line of succession has ignited certain factions' wrath. Lucas felt his chest tighten. But why me? I'm just an engineer who stumbled into this. Why would that threaten them? A wry smile touched Aelara's lips. Politics, dear Lucas, rarely make sense to honest folk. To some, this marriage is an abomination of old customs. To others, an opportunity for political advantage. There are factions who would exploit it to sow chaos. One can never be sure, but we must remain vigilant. The hours dragged on as the feast progressed. Sylis, though outwardly composed, also showed signs of worry, her eyes flickering from one corner of the hall to another, as if she sensed danger lurking in the shadows. At last, the formalities concluded, and the newlywed trio was escorted to a private wing of the palace reserved for the royal family. It was a luxurious set of chambers, multiple rooms connected by arched doorways, plush furniture, and soft lighting. A suite in the eastern tower provided a panoramic view of the city. Yet the tension in the air made every gilded ornament feel like a gilded cage. In the subdued moments after the feast, Lucas found himself alone with his thoughts in one of the antechambers. The distant hum of the city's lights was comforting, but he sensed something else, the faintest shift of the air behind him. Instinct honed from years of traveling the fringes of civilized space kicked in. He ducked, and a sharp blade flashed overhead, slicing the air where his neck had been a heartbeat before. He rolled away, adrenaline surging, only to see a dark figure dressed in a tight-fitting suit of black fabric. The intruder's eyes glittered through a slitted mask. With preternatural speed, the assassin lunged again. Lucas dodged, scarcely believing this was happening. An assassination attempt in the heart of the palace, on him, no less. The figure's knife arced downward. Lucas scrambled backward, fumbling for something, anything. His fingers closed around a decorative staff mounted on the wall, some ceremonial relic. He swung it wildly. The assassin nimbly evaded, but it bought Lucas a precious moment. He shouted for help, voice echoing. Then, as the assassin lunged once more, a swirl of midnight blue fabric appeared at the door. Princess Aelara, stepping in with the grace of a trained warrior, flicked her wrist. A small, hidden blade shot from beneath her sleeve. In 2 precise movements, she disarmed the attacker, striking him in the wrist, and forced him to drop the blade. The intruder hissed, spun, and tried to break away. At that instant, more palace guards stormed in. The intruder, seeing no chance, hurled a small device onto the floor. A blinding flash erupted, forcing them all to shield their eyes. When vision returned, the assassin was gone, vanished through the open window into the night. Lucas, still clutching the ornate staff, tried to calm his hammering heart. Aelara, breathing heavily, glared at the window. Guards rushed about, scanning for any sign of the intruder, but it was clear the assassin had made a clean escape. My sister and I suspected something like this might happen, Aelara said, voice low. Are you injured? Lucas shook his head, adrenaline still coursing. No, thanks to you. He stared at her, awed by how swiftly she had reacted. She gave a curt nod, glancing at the swirling curtains in the window. Moments later, Sylis arrived, flanked by a retinue of armed sentinels, eyes wide. Lucas, are you all right? We heard your cry. He nodded again, letting the staff fall to the ground with a clang. I'm fine somehow. Sylis approached, gripping his hand with surprising firmness. Whoever dares strike at you, or any member of this family, will face Velmoran justice. We cannot allow these plots to continue. The guards took statements, examined the scene, and promised to double security around the suite. Even so, a chill settled over Lucas. He realized, with stark clarity, that he was no longer a mere engineer, free to move about at will. He was part of the royal family, entangled in the Empire's politics, and targeted by conspirators. His accidental marriage had painted a target on his back. The Emperor of Velmora, rumored to be traveling the outer systems, did not return in the days following the wedding. Instead, messages from his flagship, the Eternal Crown, announced repeated delays. Whispers abounded. Some said he was dealing with a crisis in the border colonies, others that an internal dispute within the High Council had forced him to remain away. Yet many believed darker forces were at play. During this uneasy interlude, Lucas found his new status both confining and unexpectedly liberating. Confined, because he was constantly attended by guards and palace staff who strove to keep him safe from further attacks. Liberating, in a sense, because Princess Sylis and even Princess Aelara allowed him glimpses of their realm's wonders, trusting that he had no malicious intentions. One morning, the princesses decided to show Lucas the royal archives, a vast subterranean repository of knowledge. The entrance lay beneath the palace, guarded by colossal statues of Velmoran emperors. A winding staircase descended into chambers lined with crystalline shelves, each brimming with data tablets, ancient scrolls, and genealogical records spanning millennia. As they ventured deeper into the archives, glowing orbs overhead illuminated text carved into the walls. Ancient Velmoran script telling stories of cosmic conquests, alliances forged and broken, and the lineage of noble houses. Sylis led the way, explaining bits of history, her gentle voice echoing in the hushed corridors. Aelara followed, ensuring no threat lurked in the shadows. At length, they arrived at a small, secluded alcove. Books with archaic covers lay strewn about a long table. Data tablets blinked with unread messages. Sylis gently ran her fingertips over one of the open tomes. "This section details the earliest laws of Velmora," she said, glancing at Lucas. "We tried to find a loophole for your situation, but it was fruitless." Lucas nodded, a rueful smile tugging at his lips. "I appreciate your efforts. I suppose it's fate then." Aelara gave a faint snort. "Fate, or misfortune, but perhaps we can make it work." As they browsed the volumes, an odd hush seemed to settle. An older archivist shuffled up, bowing deeply to the princesses. "My ladies, pardon the intrusion, but I believe you may wish to see this." He extended a data tablet with trembling hands. "I've stumbled upon something in the genealogical records, a connection that might hold significance." Taking the tablet, Aelara scanned the contents. Her face tightened, brows knitting. She handed it to Sylis, who inhaled sharply. These records suggest that our mother's line may trace a distant bond with the House of Zirian, an ancient dynasty that once ruled beyond the nebular rift. They were rumored to have ties to certain telepathic or clairvoyant abilities. But it's all speculation." Lucas peered over Sylis's shoulder. The text was in formal script, referencing obscure genealogical branches, forging connections through generations long past. He caught phrases like blood of the Watchers and inheritance of the mind's eye, cryptic at best. "What does it mean?" he asked. "Could it be relevant to the attempts on your lives?" Aelara responded, her voice hushed. The Zirian lineage was believed, centuries ago, to be extinct or dormant. There have been prophecies about the awakening of that bloodline. Some zealots might see your marriage to us, an outsider marrying potential heirs with ancient powers, as a threat or a catalyst for certain cosmic shifts. Superstitious nonsense, perhaps, but enough to stir conspiracies. A chill ran through Lucas. "Are you saying you or Sylis might possess psychic powers?" Sylis looked thoughtful. "Neither of us have displayed anything more than ordinary intuition. Still, sometimes I have dreams, strange ones that seem to hint at future events. I never paid them much mind, but perhaps we ought to be cautious." They thanked the archivist and left the alcove. As they climbed back toward the palace halls, Lucas's mind spun with questions. The notion of hidden abilities, secret powers tied to the royal line, felt outlandish. Yet, in a universe brimming with unknowns, it was not entirely impossible. If certain factions believed the princesses harbored dormant gifts, might they seek to eliminate them or harness them? Daily life in the palace assumed a pattern for Lucas. He rose, dined with the princesses, attended official gatherings or briefings, and tried to glean information about the swirling intrigue. Each day brought new rumors, whispers of sabotage in distant sectors, of cloak and dagger dealings among the High Council. He never knew whom to trust beyond Aelara, Sylis, and Lady Mayrilla. Chancellor Erastes, that towering, austere figure, remained guarded in Lucas's presence. His counsel was rarely sought by the princesses, at least while Lucas observed, yet Erastes still wielded considerable power. Late one afternoon, Lucas was passing through a corridor when he overheard Erastes speaking with a robed advisor in clipped, hushed tones. "He is a nuisance," Erast was saying. An outsider, an unknown factor. The marriage threatens the delicate structure of our alliances. Lucas listened quietly, hidden behind a tall pillar. The robed advisor replied in a gravelly voice. Should we not remove him, Chancellor? He was but a happenstance, no? The princesses would remain in line for the throne. Erast made a low sound of frustration. If it were so simple. But the ancient laws bind him to them. Harming him would provoke scandal. We must tread carefully. Lucas's blood chilled. Though Erast was not blatantly plotting an assassination, the conversation made it clear. The Chancellor viewed him as an obstacle, a piece to be maneuvered or removed if necessary. He slipped away unnoticed, taking care not to alert them. That night, he told Aelara what he had heard. She frowned, not surprised, but vexed. Erast is a traditionalist. He loathes outside interference. We must keep our guard up. Sylis, however, suggested a subtler approach. There may be some we can trust who also oppose Erast's, she mused. The High Council is not a monolith. Let us see if we can gather allies before conflict arises. In the days that followed, Sylis discreetly contacted certain council members known for moderate stances, men and women who believed in forging new alliances with off-world powers. Lucas joined her, though he was uneasy stepping into politics. He found them surprisingly receptive. Some were enthralled by the idea of forging closer ties with other star systems, of bridging cultures. We have lived in isolation for too long, said Councillor Jover, a scholarly figure with round spectacles. Perhaps this union is a sign that Velmora should emerge onto the galactic stage. He offered Lucas a handshake. You have my support, for whatever that is worth. Slowly, a network of sympathetic voices emerged. Yet every success was overshadowed by signs of mounting opposition. Secret documents circulated among the council, warning of dire prophecies should the Xerian bloodline awaken. Some rumored that the princess's marriage to an off-worlder would trigger the twilight of empires, a superstitious notion that meddling with alien lines would bring cosmic ruin. Amidst this tension, Lucas found a measure of comfort in Aelara and Sylis themselves. Gradually, they opened up. Aelara spoke of the burdens of leadership, the countless expectations placed upon her from birth. Sylis revealed her passion for Velmoran art and music, her love of quiet nights spent stargazing from the palace turrets. In return, Lucas shared tales of his drifting life among the stars, the lonely cargo runs, and the fleeting friendships with fellow travelers. He even recounted his earliest days on Earth, though it felt a lifetime away. Such moments of closeness reminded him that, forced or not, they were now family. He could not quite call it love, at least, not yet. But there was a mutual respect blossoming, perhaps even a tender fondness, especially with Sylis's gentle encouragement and Aelara's guarded but growing trust. Their kindness eased his anxieties, though did not diminish the threats that lurked. Weeks passed. The Emperor remained absent, his dispatches terse. The attempts on Lucas's life ceased for a time, yet the atmosphere in the palace grew ever more uneasy. Rumors swirled of an alliance forming between Erasts and a shadowy group called the Sons of Dominion, zealots who believed the Velmoran Empire must remain pure of alien influence. Late one night, while the palace slept, Lucas found himself plagued by restlessness. The memory of that assassin's blade haunted him. He rose from bed, intending to pace the corridors and clear his mind. Before he could open his door, a soft knock startled him. Opening it, he found Princess Sylis, eyes wide, a cloak draped over her nightgown. "Lucas, come quickly," she whispered, anxiety dripping from each word. "Aelara, she's not in her room. I fear something is amiss. She would not wander at this hour without telling me." A spasm of dread shot through him. He pulled on a shirt and shoes, following Sylis into the corridor, where two of her trusted guards waited. Together, they searched the palace halls, guided by faint footprints on the polished floor. Eventually, they discovered an unguarded side entrance left ajar, the faint gleam of starlight beyond. They slipped outside into a moonlit courtyard filled with sculpted hedges and silent fountains. At the far end of the courtyard, near a gate, they spotted a cluster of figures. Moonlight revealed Aelara, seemingly unconscious, slumped in the arms of an unknown man. Three more figures hovered close. The hush of night was broken by Sylis's gasp. Within heartbeats, the intruders noticed them. One hissed a command. They began dragging Aelara toward an awaiting hovercraft parked beyond the gate. Sylis ran forward, calling her sister's name, while the guards drew their weapons. Lucas, thoughts racing, sprinted to intercept. A frenzied struggle ensued in the courtyard's gloom. The kidnappers, masked and agile, fought with brutal efficiency. Sylis's guards engaged 2 of them. Lucas tackled a third, grappling in the grass. He received a blow to the ribs that nearly drove the air from his lungs, but adrenaline fueled his resistance. He struggled to keep the captor from dragging Aelara away. Another figure, tall and wiry, lunged at Sylis. She retreated, raising her arms defensively. In a flash, it seemed her eyes glowed a faint silver in the moonlight. The assailant froze momentarily, confusion flickering across his face. Sylis's gaze bored into him for a second that felt like eternity, and in that instant, Lucas recalled the genealogical record that hinted at latent powers. With a strangled cry, the man staggered back, clutching his head, as though gripped by unseen force. Sylis, trembling, lowered her arms. The man collapsed, unconscious. The eerie glow faded from her eyes as quickly as it had appeared. She blinked, uncertain of what had just transpired. Lucas seized the moment to land a decisive punch on the captor he wrestled with. The figure crumpled. Meanwhile, one of Sylis's guards cut off the retreat of the last 2, who promptly abandoned their kidnapping attempt and fled into the darkness. Amid the confusion, the kidnappers' hovercraft sped away, leaving them behind. They rushed to Aelara's side. She stirred, eyes fluttering open. A bruise darkened her temple. Through a daze, she murmured that someone had called her out of her chambers, claiming an urgent message from the Emperor, only to ambush her in the corridor. They wanted to take me away, she rasped, to force me to sign some sort of abdication. I couldn't fight them alone. Sylis cradled her sister's head, relief flooding her features. Lucas exhaled a shaky breath, adrenaline still thrumming through his veins. The palace guards raised an alarm, and soon reinforcements swarmed the courtyard, securing the scene, detaining the unconscious kidnapper. But the tall, wiry one that Sylis had incapacitated had vanished into the night, leaving behind only trampled flowers and a sense of dread. The foiled kidnapping galvanized the palace. Investigations began, revealing that Chancellor Aelara had close ties to certain radical factions. While no direct evidence pinned him to the attempt, suspicion weighed heavily. The High Council convened in an emergency session. Each member demanded answers. Meanwhile, the battered would-be kidnapper was interrogated in the dungeons. Lucas, standing beside Sylis and Aelara in the council chamber, listened as Captain Raelon of the Royal Guard reported findings. "We have determined that the kidnappers are indeed affiliated with the Sons of Dominion," he declared. "They sought to capture Princess Aelara and pressure her into relinquishing her claim to the throne. The presence of an off-world consort, as well as rumored latent powers, appeared to have inflamed their zeal." Shock rippled through the chamber. Council members murmured among themselves. Chancellor Aelara stood near the dais, face rigid. He interjected, "This is a travesty, an atrocity. I condemn it wholeheartedly. I have no ties to such traitors." Aelara, though pale from her ordeal, addressed him coolly. "Then perhaps you will cooperate fully with the investigation, Chancellor. For if we discover any complicity, the penalty for treason is severe." Aelara bowed stiffly, a mask of subservience on his face. "Of course, Your Highness." In the tense aftermath, it was Sylis who approached Lucas privately. She looked troubled, yet resolute. "We cannot continue living in fear," she said. "My sister and I believe it is time we took bold action. If Aelara is involved, if these Sons of Dominion threaten not only us but the Empire itself, we must confront them openly. But we need your help." Lucas blinked, uncertain. "How can I help? I'm just a mechanic at heart." She gazed at him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. "Precisely. You have a logical mind, untainted by Velmoran politics. You see solutions where others see tradition. We need your skills, and we need your courage. Will you stand by our side?" For a moment, Lucas thought of the starship waiting in orbit, of the easy life he once led, free from palace intrigue. Yet those days seemed impossibly distant. Now, he was a husband to these royal sisters, bound by law and, to his surprise, by growing affection. Despite everything, He could not turn his back on them. He nodded. "Count on me," he said softly, and Sylis' smile was a balm to his anxieties. Rumors spread that the Emperor was finally on his way, prompting a sense of urgency. If they were to root out the conspiracy before the Emperor's arrival, they needed evidence of Aelaras's betrayal. Quietly, Aelara, Sylis, and Lucas conferred with a handful of trusted allies. Lady Mayrila, Counselor Jover, and Captain Raylon were among them. Together, they hatched a plan. They would lure Aelaras's into revealing his hand. Using the captured kidnapper as bait, they spread misinformation suggesting that he had divulged the location of the Sons of Dominion's secret enclave. Aelaras's would either do nothing, or attempt to silence the prisoner and cover his tracks, thus implicating himself. Meanwhile, Lucas, leveraging his engineering know-how, would discreetly place surveillance devices in corridors near Aelaras's private offices. When the trap was laid, tension mounted by the hour. Every footstep in the palace seemed ominous, every whisper potentially a sign of betrayal. The nights were restless, Aelara still recovering from her injuries, Sylis fighting to remain calm, Lucas torn between fear and grim determination. Finally, under cover of the third moon's crescent glow, Aelaras's made his move. The palace's security systems, newly augmented by Lucas's cunning hand, picked up unauthorized movements in the lower levels. A robed figure, accompanied by 2 armed men, crept into the dungeons. Through the lenses of hidden cameras, Lucas, Sylis, and Raylon watched in real time as Aelaras's confronted the imprisoned kidnapper. Voices came through in faint, crackling transmissions. "You must not speak another word," Aelaras's hissed at the prisoner. "If you value your life, remain silent. The Emperor is returning soon, and with him, the chance to remove these meddling princesses and their Terran consort. But first, I must ensure you keep my name from your confessions." He gestured to his men, who advanced on the prisoner with menacing intent. In that moment, Captain Raylon and his squad burst into the dungeons, weapons raised. Aelaras's men attempted to fight, but were overwhelmed. Aelaras's himself spun, his face contorted with fury, only to find Sylis, Aelara, still slightly bruised, and Lucas standing in the archway. The jig was up. With a sneer, he spat, "Fools. Do you truly think you can preserve the Empire by tainting our lineage with an outsider? Velmora shall suffer for your blindness." Aelara regarded him with regal detachment. "No, Chancellor. Our Empire will endure because we adapt, because we value unity over fear. Guards, take him away." Aelaras's struggled, hurling curses, but it was of no use. Shackled, he was led away, his once powerful form hunched in disgrace. The revelation of his conspiracy sent shockwaves through Velmora Prime. The High Council, outraged, convened to strip him of all titles, and an emergency tribunal found him guilty of treason. The Sons of Dominion were dealt a crippling blow, their hidden enclaves raided, their plots laid bare. News traveled swiftly across the stars. At long last, the Emperor's flagship, the Eternal Crown, arrived in orbit. Imperial fanfare reached a crescendo as the mighty vessel, bristling with advanced weaponry and shimmering in the sunlight, docked at the palace's towering spire port. Lucas, standing beside the princesses, watched the Emperor descend the ramp with an entourage of elaborately garbed attendants. Emperor Talion was a tall, imposing figure with hair of silver and eyes that exuded command. His ornate robes glimmered in gold, and each step resonated with the authority of a ruler born to the scepter. Behind him trailed a swirling cloak embroidered with star patterns. Aelara and Sylis bowed deeply, Lucas following suit with only a moment's hesitation. Talion surveyed them with an inscrutable gaze. Then, to Lucas's shock, the Emperor inclined his head. "My daughters," he said, voice echoing in the hushed docking bay, "and my new son-in-law, I presume." The word son-in-law settled heavily in Lucas's mind. He nodded, swallowing. "Your Majesty." Talion's eyes flicked over them, lingering on the faint bruise at Aelara's temple. His jaw tightened. "I have been informed of the treachery committed by Aelaras's and his conspirators. It seems you have weathered quite the storm in my absence." "Yes, father," Aelara replied. "Much has happened, but the conspirators have been subdued. Their power is broken." With measured steps, Talion approached them. His expression softened only slightly as he addressed Lucas. Though this union began under unusual circumstances, it appears you have stood by my daughters in their time of need. I commend that." He paused, the air thick with tension. Then he gave a decisive nod. "Henceforth, you shall be recognized as consort Lucas Kane of the Velmoran Empire, with all rights and privileges thereof. May you continue to safeguard my children." A wave of relief washed over Lucas. He exchanged glances with Sylis, who offered a small, encouraging smile. Aelara's lips curved in subtle approval. It seemed he had, at last, won the Emperor's acknowledgement. The official ceremonies lasted well into the night. Music filled the palace halls again, but this time, the mood was not weighed down by suspicion. People mingled, curious about the off-world consort who had helped unmask a traitor. Toasts were offered, and feast tables were laden with delicacies from across the empire. For the first time, Lucas felt the palace's splendor without the oppressive weight of fear. Late in the evening, on a balcony overlooking the city awash in moonlight, Lucas stood with Aelara and Sylis. A gentle breeze teased at their hair, and the city lights flickered like a reflection of the starry sky above. A sense of quiet contentment, mingled with the faint thrill of possibility, hung in the air. Aelara, leaning on the balustrade, gazed out at her realm. This empire has endured for centuries, through war and peace alike. Yet it stands at the threshold of change. Perhaps, with your presence, we can strengthen bonds beyond our borders, embrace new alliances, and ensure Velmora's future. Sylis nodded in agreement. The galaxy is vast. So much we have yet to learn. I believe that by opening our gates to new friends, we enrich ourselves. Lucas listened, their words echoing thoughts he too had begun to harbor. "It's strange," he said softly. "I came here a stranger, a passerby. But now, I feel responsible for this place. For you both." Aelara's eyes flicked toward him. A warm sincerity lit her gaze, like a star rising in the darkness. "In time, you may come to love Velmora as we do. And we, in turn, may find comfort in sharing that love with you." Sylis slipped her hand into Lucas's, her touch gentle. "We thank you for standing with us. We know this was not a life you chose." Lucas's heart pounded at that simple contact, the final sign of acceptance. "Perhaps," he said, "it was a life that chose me." Strange as that sounds. They stood there in silence, the three of them, each lost in thought yet united by the unusual bond forged through law, adversity, and the faint glimmer of affection that had taken root despite the tumult. Overhead, the triple moons shone in silver arcs, as though blessing the empire and the union that defied all odds. In the weeks that followed, a measure of calm settled over Velmora Prime. Chancellor Erastus' trial concluded with a sentence of perpetual exile on a remote asteroid colony, ensuring he would no longer threaten the stability of the throne. The Sons of Dominion, fractured by the loss of their leader and exposed to public disdain, slipped into the shadows, greatly diminished. Emperor Talion, impressed by Lucas's resourcefulness, and perhaps moved by his daughter's acceptance of their husband, invited Lucas to join the Imperial Council as an advisor on off-world technologies. Though it was an intimidating prospect, Lucas accepted the honor, hoping to use his expertise to propel Velmora into an era of innovation and prosperity. Rumors about Princess Sylis's possible clairvoyant abilities circulated in hushed corridors, but she neither confirmed nor denied them. At times, she confided in Lucas about vivid dreams, images of possible futures drifting through her mind. She confided that she hoped to harness them, if indeed they were real, to guide Velmora toward peace. As for Aelara, her once formidable walls had softened somewhat in Lucas's presence. Though still every inch the regal air, she allowed moments of vulnerability, glimpses of warmth that transcended mere duty. In subtle ways, she signaled her trust, consulting Lucas on matters of security, walking the palace corridors at his side without the usual entourage, occasionally surprising him with a dry, clever wit that made him laugh aloud. Perhaps the greatest proof of acceptance came one starlit evening, when the Emperor held a private gathering to celebrate the Empire's continued unity. Musicians played gentle tunes as the royal family, unburdened by the cloak of formality, conversed and laughed. The Emperor and Aelara stood on one side, discussing matters of governance, while Sylis and Lucas admired a newly unveiled sculpture. a sweeping piece of crystal shaped like the wings of a cosmic phoenix. Sylis leaned in, whispering, "Legend says the phoenix represents rebirth, the triumph over adversity. May it be a sign for us all." She glanced at Lucas, eyes shining with hope. "Though you were once a stranger in these halls, I see now that you belong here. We can make a place for you, together." Overcome by a quiet wave of emotion, Lucas placed his hand over hers on the balustrade. "I never imagined I'd find something like this. Not just a throne, or a crown, or a title, but belonging. Perhaps that's the real gift Velmora has given me." Sylis's cheeks flushed faintly. Across the room, Aelara caught Lucas's eye, offering a slight nod that conveyed approval and something deeper. In that moment, Lucas knew that though his life had changed beyond recognition, there was solace in forging a future hand in hand with two princesses who had opened their world and their hearts to him. In time, that future would demand countless decisions about politics, technology, alliances with other star systems. The challenges would be immense, the path uncertain. Yet the seeds of unity had been planted, nurtured by loyalty, shared trials, and mutual respect. Where once Lucas Kane had stumbled in as a hapless engineer, he now walked beside royalty with a sense of purpose. And in the hush of that velvety night, the shimmering towers of Velmora Prime rose around them as silent witnesses, guardians of a new destiny. So ended the dire tensions and conspiracies that threatened to tear the Empire apart. So began a new era of cooperation, faith, and the promise of brighter tomorrows. In the glimmer of the triple moons, a man from the stars, once an outsider, embraced his fate as consort, protector, and friend to the princesses of Velmora. And in the celestial tapestry above, it was said the cosmic threads themselves shone a little brighter that night, weaving their way through time and space, forging a fresh chapter in the grand epic of the galaxy, one where an accidental union became the cornerstone of a hopeful and happy future for them all.